taking refuge in generating bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Abandoning evil doing, practice virtue well, subdue your mind. This is the Buddha's teaching. Like a star, an optical illusion, or a flame, a magical illusion, a dewdrop, or a bubble, like a dream, a flash of lightning, or a cloud, so should one consider all compounded things. We should reflect on impermanence while reciting this. By this merit may we attain omniscience and overcome our enemy, our harmful deeds, and may beings buffeted by the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death be liberated from the ocean of existence. The heart of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling on Master Vulture's mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara: how should any son of lineage trained who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell on the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the endpoint of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Tayata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharadvati Putra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. Praise to Manjushri. Homage to my Guru and Protector Manjushri, who holds to his heart a scriptural text, symbolic of his seeing of all things as they are, whose understanding shines forth as the sun, unclouded by delusions or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways, with the loving compassion of a father for his only son, all creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You whose dragon thunder-like proclamation of Dhamma arouses us from the stupor of our delusions and frees us from the iron chains of our karma, who wields the sword of wisdom, hewing down suffering wherever its sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of all ignorance. You whose princely body is adorned with the 112 marks of a Buddha, who has completed the 10 stages, achieving the highest perfections of a Bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning, I bow down to you, Manjushri. Om Aravatsanadi. With the brilliance of your wisdom, O compassionate one, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind, enlighten my intelligence and wisdom so that I might gain insight into the Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. By the virtue of offering to you assembly of Buddhas, visualized before me, this mandala built on a base resplendent with flowers, saffron water and incense, adorned with Mount Meru and the 4 continents, as well as the sun and the moon, may all sentient beings share in its good effects. Please enjoy and bless me and all sentient beings to be released from the 3 poisonous minds, for I am offering without attachment my body, enemies, friends, and strangers, and all possessions which are the objects of my greed, ignorance, and hatred. O holy and venerable Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dhammakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dhamma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Tayami. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious gurus.
Thank you. So we're going to move on, and we'll have many, many things to reflect upon, because we're dealing with very pithy instructions, and they're instructions that are able to be put into immediate practice by us in our present situations, from our present situation. So even though our goals are vast and unimaginably vast, the actual techniques that we're learning by studying Shantideva's text are perfectly adjusted or refined so that they can be adopted according to our own situation. And so this is the essence of the teachings that we're presenting. So we've been giving away vast cosmological objects as offerings. And in the last verse we came to last week, we said, lakes and pools adorned with lotuses and the beautiful cry of wild geese, everything unowned within the limitless spheres of space. So given we've made these huge offerings, in verse 6, creating these things in my mind, I offer them to the supreme beings, the Buddhas, as well as their sons. O compassionate ones, think kindly of me and accept these offerings of mine. So Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and their children are included here because they are the compassionate ones, and thus are perfectly reliable recipients of our offerings. If the objects of our offerings were murderers or violent thugs, or those who only look after their own kind to the exclusion of others, it would be a different story. This is why we're able to give so wholeheartedly, so openly, because we completely trust the refuge objects as the recipients of these deepest offerings. We don't open ourselves or expose ourselves to any danger in that openness. So as we offer, we're to feel that each moment they're accepting the offering, they experience a fresh, new, uncontaminated bliss in their mind. This is very important to consider. Geshe Doga notes that we shouldn't make the conceptual mistake here of thinking that this means that a fresh, new, uncontaminated bliss is arising in the Supreme Being's minds for the very first time. Why not? This would rather awkwardly imply that they had some lingering obscuration, preventing them from experiencing uncontaminated bliss continuously and spontaneously. So this is a very significant point because it emphasizes that we're thinking that they experience uncontaminated fresh bliss from our perspective for a very particular reason. It's for our benefit, in other words, not for the benefit of the holy objects, because they are already endowed with all benefits. From their side, they don't need our offerings, not even our offerings. And they don't need offerings to be made somehow more happy than they already are. So the purpose I would suggest is pedagogical, in that it teaches us to recognize that offering bliss in this way will indeed, karmically speaking, lead to our capacity to grant great spontaneous bliss in the minds of others on the basis of our enlightenment when it is actually attained. So it's not just a symbolic game. We are laying down the foundations for this to actually occur through our current actions of offering, based as they are on our bodhicitta motivation. So Geshe Doga, in his commentary, asks us to consider a second quandary that might arise in relation to our thinking that the Buddhas experience fresh, uncontaminated new bliss in their mind. From the side of the Buddha, it is reasonable to acknowledge that each time we make a new offering, the enlightened beings experience new, uncontaminated bliss. So how do we present this and get away with it, given we've just said that they're continuously experiencing bliss? The answer resides in the fact that we mustn't collate generating uncontaminated bliss with the generation of uncontaminated bliss for the very first time. The fact is that Buddhas do experience great bliss continuously, and it's because of this continuity, which means that each moment of bliss arises from a previous moment of bliss without any break. It is indeed reasonable to propose that they might experience a new uncontaminated bliss upon receiving our offering. Really interesting to consider, isn't it? This is because it would pertain to a moment of bliss arising at that specific time. Perhaps we can better understanding this by considering how Buddhas are smiling all of the time, But when they see someone perform a virtuous act, they smile to that person to show their special pleasure that such a virtuous act has been performed. So we'll move now to verse 7, and this concludes the account of how we're to think while offering. Having no merit, I am destitute, and I have no other gifts to offer. O protectors, you who think of helping others, by your power, accept these for my sake. We have already addressed in earlier verses how we're to overcome such feelings of impoverishment that might otherwise hinder our capacity to offer by making exponentially increased mental or imaginary offerings, especially of those things that are unowned. But here, our statement, or perhaps it's our kind of confessional declaration of destitution, we're declaring that we're destitute, is intended to work as a pungent rhetorical device to invoke, more forcibly, if you like, the protectors to come immediately to our personal aid. So we're trying to cajole the Buddhas here. It's cheeky, isn't it? We're trying to cajole the Buddhas to respond to us because we're destitute. We're in real need. We're in strife. You must come now. Look at me. I'm a desperate person, a derelict person. So this rhetorical device, however, I think we'd have to acknowledge is also based upon a very real truth, which is that as things currently stand, we are indeed to be found destitute. We are impoverished in merit and hopelessly rich or superabundantly endowed with non-virtues. So much so that we're unable to help ourselves, let alone others. Because the prognosis is so grim, if we're left stranded, we must throw ourselves upon the protectors. There's no alternative for us. So there's also a certain, I've used the word cunning, it's maybe gives slightly the wrong inflection, but nonetheless, it's a form of kind of cunning in the logic of our supplication here. And it's been found embedded in the last two lines of the verse, which read, O protectors, you who think of helping others, by your power, accept these for my sake. So we're making an appeal here to the Buddha's reasoning, if you like. And the argument goes, if you, the Buddhas, have thought to help others, then surely you must also help me, because I am one of those others. Therefore, on what basis could you refuse my offering and correspondingly refuse to come to my aid? As if the Buddhas needed cajoling. So the real purpose of this rhetorical supplication is directed back towards us. We are required to urgently move beyond our habitual sense of self-absorption, according to which we continuously ignore the plight of others, which is the exact opposite of the protector's stance. This is the meaning, pursued with relentless logic, behind several verses in chapter 8 on meditation. So I'm just going to quote those here because this happens all the time in a wonderful way with Shantideva's text. It resonates across chapters to other verses and other sets of verses. So it's really, really helpful to do this. So 94, hence I should dispel the misery of others because it is suffering just like my own. And I should benefit others because they are sentient beings just like myself. When both myself and others are similar and that we wish to be happy, what is so special about me? Why do I strive for my own happiness alone? And when both myself and others are similar in that we do not wish to suffer, what is so special about me? Why do I protect myself and not others? These are powerful, powerful questions. So they lead us to another subtle purpose of this verse. It reflexively indicates that the Buddhas, from their side, will help us irrespective of whether or not we feel worthy ourselves of being rescued. So this sort of puts our cry of destitution into complete context. It's irrelevant to the Buddhas whether we declare ourselves derelict or impoverished, because they see exactly the situation and respond accordingly. So this is a measure, in other words, of the enlightened being's impartiality, compassionate impartiality. And this is exactly what we are seeking as trainee bodhisattvas to emulate. It is precisely because we are already so familiar with a fear of personal exclusion, being left out, that we should surely comprehend with a real keenness how others feel the pain and fear of rejection likewise. So, how could I ever abandon, even given my current afflicted ordinary form, a single one of you? To argue that I can, while holding myself in high favour or highest favour and regard, is the grotesque inverse of a hypothetical Buddha who would think to embrace every single one except for me. That's why I said hypothetical, because no Buddha thinks like that. There is never one person left out. So when I appeal, as in the verse, O protectors, you who think of helping others by your power, accept these for my sake, I'm actually confessing that before this moment, since beginningless time, I have myself been consistently abandoning others, even when their fates are perilous. For my part, I have been impervious to their cries. And I can't help but think here, because of what's happening with the dreadful earthquakes in Syria and Turkey, that the complete failure of the international community to rescue Syrians trapped under rubble while feeling able to rush into Turkey to pull people out from under slabs of concrete exemplifies the way these mechanisms work. So just as they work on a global scale, where impartiality is certainly not the case, the recognition of everyone's life to be equally worthy is certainly not the case. We can then import it to our local situation. When and how do I exclude others? When am I impervious to their cry? So there's yet another layer to this interpretation. I'm appealing to the Buddhas on the basis that even if I'm found destitute, I know that you will still come to my aid. Such is your compassion. So again, this reflexively exposes the fact that I have not come to the aid of those who are destitute myself. Now I am aware of this appalling fact and seek to behave differently. So on the cusp of this verse, this is what Shantideva was asking us to swing around, this radical shift of perspective. So from this perspective, the very recognition of my destitution, my impoverishment, is performing as a vital catalyst for changing my pathetic ways. I'm using the word pathetic quite deliberately there. Therefore, I'm seeking refuge so that I might too become a protector of others. So there's a further point. You see how rich these verses are when you really start to spend some time with them. It's quite amazing. So Gelt Sabje, in his commentary to this verse, instructs us how we are to feel upon having made this offering to the Triple Gem. He says that we are to feel fearless. Quote, having offered it, whatever action I do, since I am being held by you, the protector, I am unafraid of cyclic existence because I am relying on a refuge that is free of all fears. And I will benefit sentient beings. I will benefit sentient beings based on that fearlessness. So I think we could say that this fearlessness in this context is another word for the most resolute courage based on the conviction, as we've described in the first class, of our own potential enlightenment. In other words, we have a deep inner confidence that in making offerings to the Triple Gem, we will indeed create the necessary causes to become endowed with the qualities of fearlessness, completely qualified fearlessness, that they have already achieved and so wondrously exemplify. Now that we are, so that we are now unafraid of cyclic existence, as Kubje, unafraid of cyclic existence, as Kubje Sabje puts it, is because we have finally understood the causes of samsara, and we finally appreciate that those causes can be remedied by applying a true path. Without such awareness, any hope we have of escaping the fears of cyclic existence, which is the home of all fears, will be empty of meaning or intent. So on this point, His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, unless you have a pure determination to free yourself from the ocean of cyclic existence, your attempts to achieve peace will be in vain. It is our fascination with cyclic existence owing to craving and attachment that binds us within it. Therefore, if we really seek the peace of liberation, the right course to adopt is to generate the determination to be free, to recognize the faults of cyclic existence and reject them. The biography of the Buddha himself can provide us with a clear understanding of the meaning of the determination to be free for our own practice. End of quote. So for those who are interested, that comes from His Holiness's book, The Essence of Lama Tsongkhapa's Teachings, page 33. So it is independence on this pure determination to free ourselves from the ocean of cyclic existence that we open the path to generate the precious mind of awakening. Because we can, if we now understand how to free ourselves, we can comprehend how others might be freed also. So the converse is true. If we don't know how to free ourselves, then how on earth are we to consider how others might be free? And therefore, how could we even conceive of a path leading to either our freedom or their freedom? So all the paths would kind of collapse because there'd be no functionality, no workability there. So Pabonka makes this very point in Liberation in the Palm of the Hand. No, sorry, it's in the Principal Teachings of Buddhism. So it's a concise commentary on the Lama Tsongkhapa's 3 principles of the path. He says, renunciation is the one special cause that brings you to what we call great compassion. This is fascinating and very important. I'll read it again. Renunciation is the one special cause that brings you to what we call great compassion. To get this compassion, you must first find true thoughts of renunciation. Great compassion is a state of mind where you absolutely can no longer bear to see others being tormented by the sufferings of life. There's no way you can achieve it as long as you are concerned about the way life torments you, because you are so feeble that your feeling of renunciation and compassion could not even blow down a single upright hair. So without renunciation, our compassion has no force. It's incapable of even knocking over a single strand of hair. That's how weak it is. So this points to why Gyaltsab Sabje, in his commentary on Shantideva's verse, is asking us, following our making of an offering to the Triple Gem, to be unafraid of cyclic existence itself. Because if we do succumb to such a fear, we will not only continue to be tormented, distressed, overwhelmed by the fears of cyclic existence, but we will be incapacitated in any attempt, even if we can temporarily muster it, of helping others escape the same torments. Therefore, how could we generate, let alone maintain, even an aspirational bodhicitta in such circumstances? Pabonka continues his commentary, which I've his quote, which I've just given, with, believe it or not, the following Shantideva quote: "If people like these have never before, even in the dreams they dream, felt such a wish for themselves, then how can it come to them for others?" So this corresponds to verse 24, you'll recall, in chapter 1, which said, if those beings have never before even dreamt of such an attitude for their own sake, how could it ever arise for the sake of others. So Pabonka adds, after quoting this verse of Shantideva, thus, and this is remarkable to think about, thus we can say that renunciation and compassion are the same state of mind. Just that one is developed by meditating on your own situation, and the other by meditating on the situation of others. So I'll repeat that because it is incredibly precious. Thus, we can say that renunciation and compassion are the same state of mind. Just that one is developed by meditating on your own situation, and the other by meditating on the situation of others. So this has an enormous impact for our practice because it shows the kind of fluid cohesion and the integration of our practice. And it also shows you how we are encapsulating the practices of the small and middle scopes as essential foundations for our practices of bodhicitta. And this is why renunciation comes before bodhicitta in Tsongkhapa's famous presentation of the three principles of the path. It's because the order of the sequence coincides with that of our own mind generation. See what we're getting at? It's actually describing the way in which we unfurl the mind of bodhicitta based on renunciation. And then to actualize the goals and the promises of our bodhicitta, we need to realize the nature of reality and so forth. And so we can't do without the third principle if we want to achieve our enlightenment goal. So this is remarkable to think about. So we now arrive at the second of Gyaltsabje's subheadings for the practice of offering, which is offering one's body. His Holiness says, then we offer our own bodies. Whether or not we have a perfect body, we should offer it sincerely. This is a method of turning away from negative actions on the physical level. So again, this is very, very profound to contemplate. We can appreciate the reason if we pause to consider how so many of our non-virtuous actions are not only carried out by the body, acting as a slave of the mind, as it were, but so many of our negative minds are produced in dependence on our physical cravings and desires, some of which we seek to reach or attain at any cost. Consider our various addictions, for example. Likewise, our vanity, our pride, our anger are often grounded in how we view my body, our body, as superior or more important than the bodies of others. It is the foundation of segregation and racism, for example. Ken Burns' astonishing documentary, which has been showing in Australia, the US and the Holocaust, I don't know if you've been watching it, it's quite remarkable, really drives this fundamental point home, because he points out, and it's not just, I'm not criticizing America here, It's just that Ken Burns is looking at it through the eyes of America. There was this tortuous struggle during the sort of stages of the final solution in Germany and Poland and so forth with the Nazi war machine, where Americans did become aware of the plight of people being exterminated, genocidally wiped out en masse, but that they still could not open the borders for refugees to flood in to escape. So many, particularly Jewish people, were attempting to escape, but they could not get papers to any country that would accept them, because America and Australia too at that early stage felt that they'd be overwhelmed by immigrants and they would lose their national flavour, their national identity. So it's quite astonishing, isn't it, to think about. Even at that moment of absolute crisis on a global scale, the boundaries of self, my body, being protected from other bodies, could not be relinquished. Your body stays there and my body stays here, and never the twain will meet, because that will interfere with my bodily stance, my bodily integrity, my ability to flourish as me. I think that's the way we think. That's the selfish mind at work. So the placement of movements and control of bodies is a way of power instrumentalizing itself, isn't it? And our afflictions operate through those vectors with incredible force. So we also carry out non-virtuous actions of speech by maneuvering our body, our lips and throat and so forth. And again, at the instigation of our mind. And for our own part, our mind is constantly invaded by thoughts of attachment to our body. And so many of our memories are connected to recalling when, in my case, our body was youthful and vital. So there's a kind of reluctance. There was a big article in the New York Times, I don't know if you read it, on Madonna's new face. Everyone following that story? She's got a completely new face and it hasn't got a single wrinkle. So there's a kind of reinvention there. I'm not judging her. I'm just saying it's kind of remarkable, isn't it? That Madonna's over 60 without a single wrinkle. And you can argue she's a performance artist and she's exploring the possibility of self-creative production, and she's happening to be utilizing various medical procedures to attain that goal as an artistic endeavor. Fine. But how deep do we need to go to find the fundamental hubris that's operating there? I won't mention names, but we have one Hollywood actress who hails from Melbourne, Australia, and she was up for an Academy Award a few years ago, and her mother, who lives just in the next suburb to me here, had the temerity to attend the Academy Awards without having had a facelift. And it became a news item around the world because she was wrinkled. It's the way she was. So I'll just mention this. It's not just women, by the way, but men are getting their bodies recontoured, their shoulders made square, their chin. They even surgically put a cleft in men's chins to give them the sort of Rock Hudson masculinity look and so forth. So I'm just saying that these are sort of fun examples, but if we go a little bit below the surface, there's actually a panic, a very, very critical urgency there, that if we lose control of our body, we lose control of everything. This is attachment, only attachment, and it gives rise to all sorts of afflictions. So, having said all that, at the same time, this body is a vehicle for producing incredible virtuous potential through the gateways of body, speech, and mind. So to offer it, as Shantideva is asking us to do in this verse, or in the series of verses to come actually, as a source of benefit and pleasure to others, must be understood as an act of incredible generosity, because it cuts across this fundamental attachment to me. So say a few words about me, not me, but the me, a me. We have a me, don't we? This me, if we look at this from a Prasangika perspective, is merely labeled to this one. Your me is merely labeled to your this one. Your this one is not this one to me, it's that one. So me is only comprehensible within the framework of imputation. There is no me here from the side of me. This is really showing you how radical the Madhyamika analysis is. If I existed as me inherently and I searched for me, I'd have to be able to extract the essence and hold it up and say, here it is, I've got it. This is the me. We're looking for it, but I've got it. Don't worry, this is it, this is me. But if I look for my body, for example, my eyelashes, my nose, my eye, my skin, break it all down, where's me? Can't be found. So conventionally speaking, there is a me because I have a special relationship with this body that you don't have. I look after this one, for example, and it's my responsibility to do so because it's my vehicle. But there is nothing intrinsically in this body that's me. And the Buddhist presentation is going to go even further and say that there is nothing inherently present in this, my body, which is human. Therefore, I can be reborn in another life as an animal and so forth. And so we don't take these sorts of thoughts into consideration when we're clinging to our body, because we are so cleaved, so attached, so incredibly tightly bound to it, that we feel if it was to be prized away and given away, we would be destitute. We would be bereft, absolutely abysmally bereft. This is not the Bodhisattva's experience at all. So I just mentioned that, not the Arhat's experience at all either. So, so this body is an instrument that can be utilized in very, very skillful ways for the benefit of others. And I was trying to think of an example of this, and it sounds like to say obvious, but it's not obvious at all in one way. The most incredibly obvious example is the way in which a mother holds her crying baby. She envelops the baby with love and care, utilizing her body and her ability to hold and cuddle. This is remarkably beautiful and remarkably potent to think about. And if only the world's morality was based on this idea of nurturing and caring, using our body as something that insulates others from harm, how we would not recognize the world around us. It would be transformed. I don't need to really elaborate why, but all those war machines that are operating the world at the moment are designed to do the maximum damage to bodies, aren't they? They're designed by scientists to be most effective. So there's a kind of contrarian impulse in our culture there. It's very confusing. So the Bodhisattva's approach to the body is to offer it up completely without any residue. So I'm going to qualify that a little bit later on, so don't panic. So I just want to, another example I thought, which I've mentioned a few times, but it's something that I live with, is that if a stranger in Wales, England, had not donated their stem cells on a global stem cell bank website, I would not be here now speaking these words to you in America. So there's a kind of ripple effect here. I'm just saying that it's just an example. That person's kindness to an absolute stranger in literally offering part of their body has enabled this body to exist for longer in this form. And on the basis of that, I'm attempting, as we all are, of course, to try to utilize this body for good, for benefit, and not for harm. Because there's incredible responsibility here to the kindness of my donor, really. How wonderful to be able to repay the gift to my donor in this way. So, of course, this is the way we're performing as bodhisattvas in every regard, in every relation. So the various latencies or valencies, probably a better word, and roles of this body are something to very deeply reflect upon. It can be both a marvelously dexterous instrument when utilized for the benefit of others, or a dreadful weapon. The point I'm making here is that when Shantideva talks of offering our bodies, he is considering it as much more than a lump of flesh. And in any case, he's not just talking about offering this body, this merely imputed human body this one time, which we currently happen to have. But Shantideva in this verse is asking us to offer all of our bodies in the future. So the stanza 7 goes on, I'll quote, "Eternally I shall offer all my bodies to the conquerors and their children. Please accept me, you supreme heroes. Respectfully shall I be your subject." So in offering our bodies to the supreme heroes, we are paying witness to the fact that we are ready to be their faithful servant or subject, together with all that entails, namely, sincerely engaging on the Bodhisattva path. If we were to offer a mere piece of jewelry while making the same request, would it carry the same weight? So it really matters to think about offering up this body because it digs very deep. Geshe Doga, following Gyaltsab Subje's commentary, says, the specific implication of the benefits of offering one's body to the supreme beings is that a supreme being is an ultimate refuge that is free from all fears. Offering oneself to a supreme being who is free from all fears will free one from all fears, particularly the fears of cyclic existence. Because one does not fear the shortcomings of cyclic existence, one has a courageous mind, which is then used to benefit sentient beings. So that, benefiting sentient beings, that is the ultimate purpose of offering one's body as a slave to the supreme protector, the ultimate refuge, as a way for oneself to become fearless in benefiting other sentient beings. So if we don't fear giving up our own body, we become fearless in the most remarkable way, because it's this clinging that is blocking us from so much of our potential development. So in any case, I think we'd have to acknowledge that the idea of giving up our body is scary. But the point is that we can currently, certainly, offer up our body imaginatively, dedicating it, as it were, to the service of sentient beings, not just in this lifetime, but in all future lifetimes. That's Shantideva's eternally. We don't just give it once, we are going to give it continuously in all situations, in all future times, spontaneously, without any attempt to hold on for ourselves. So in the future, as the capacity of our great compassion, our bodhicitta, and understanding the nature of reality grows, it's possible to actually give away our bodies, not just at the level of imagination or thought. In any case, even the wish to offer up our body now signals in a very powerful way, not only our determination to utilize whatever resources we have, not for the benefit of ourselves, but for the benefit of others. So we're taking our body as a prime resource here. These are the precise thoughts that arose in the young Prince Mahadeva's mind as he contemplated the plight of the starving tigress who was pitifully unable to feed her cubs, even though she was trying to do so. So this, of course, is from the King of Glorious Sutras called the Exalted Sublime Golden Light. So I quote, "Now the time has come," this is the prince thinking, "now the time has come for me to give this body away. Why? Although I have long guarded this putrid body, subject to death and decay, providing it with food and drink, clothing, vehicles, and luxurious beds, ultimately it is doomed to crumble and end in woe. This body has no purpose save to abandon its unknown nature. Furthermore, since it is wholly impure, it will not endure. Now, resolve, now I should use it for a noble end. Thus, it shall be for me like a boat crossing the ocean of death and rebirth." And the prince goes on. "Moreover, giving this body possessed of hundreds of abscess-like existences, filled with feces and urine, without core, like foam, bearing hundreds of worms, laying waste to what has been done, I shall attain the Dharmakaya's timeless state, free of the afflicted aggregates, sorrowless and endowed with samadhi, replete with hundreds of stainless virtues." So the sutra says that as he thought like this, it's quoting, his heart brimming with supreme compassion and resolve to give his body away to save her and her cubs. So it tells the story. Then the prince left that part of the forest and returned to where the tigress was. He hung his clothes on a forest creeper and prayed, "To benefit transmigratory beings, may I attain the peace of peerless enlightenment. My mind compassionate and steadfast, I give this body which others find hard to give up. May I achieve the flawless, priceless enlightenment that bodhisattvas so keenly seek. I shall free beings in the triple worlds from the intense fear of the ocean of existence. So, end of the quote. This is the quintessential manner in which a bodhisattva prays. You can see even at a glance that Shantideva is asking us to pray likewise when we're promising to offer our bodies eternally for the benefit of others. In his training anthology, Shantideva further extensively elaborates how bodhisattvas offer up their body, both imaginatively and literally. He quotes the vows of individual liberation for bodhisattvas, which says, quote, "Moreover, Shariputra, a bodhisattva thinks of everything as belonging to someone else and doesn't own anything." What? Why? Because ownership is fear. So Shantideva then quotes from the noble inquiry of Ugra. What is given no longer needs to be protected. What remains in the house must be protected. What is given is for the destruction of craving. What remains in the house increases craving. What is given is not owned. What is given is free from fear. What remains in the house is a cause of fear. What is given supports the path of awakening. What remains in the house supports Mara. What is given is imperishable. What remains in the house perishes. What is given leads to happiness. What remains in the house leads to suffering, because you have to protect it. What is given helps to abandon reactive emotions. What remains in the house increases reactive emotions. What is given leads to great enjoyment. What remains in the house doesn't lead to great enjoyment. What giving things away is the act of a holy person. Keeping things in the house leads to having the mind of a bad person. Giving things away is praised by all the Buddhas. Keeping things in the house is praised by foolish people. End of quote. This is page 22 from the training anthology, for those who are wishing to follow it up. So I'd sort of ask us here to, we could treat this reference to house literally, but I think it can also be read as an allegorical container for the manner in which we localize and hoard our resources, my resources, for our own exclusive benefit. And we might even extend the analogy of the house to cover the earth. One country or nation attempts to seize and hoard resources for its own exclusive benefit. Thus, it becomes a storehouse for the generation of reactive emotions, the afflictions, in other words. Border disputes and wars ensure. The environment of the world itself risks depletion, if we think like that. So it is by following this logic of giving away everything we have clustered around ourselves through the force of self-cherishing and self-grasping, because innate self-grasping is at the basis of all of this, that we arrive at the body as a key object to give to others. Shantideva, in his training anthology, quotes the inquiry of Narayana. Don't appropriate anything if you can't arouse the thought of giving it away. Don't own any property if you can't arouse the thought of giving it up. Don't take on servants if you wouldn't think of giving them away if a beggar asked for them. Don't accept royal power or possessions or wealth or any property whatsoever if you can't arouse the thought of giving them away. Indeed, noble sir, a Bodhisattva great being should arouse the following thought: I have given away and offered this, my body, to all sentient beings. How much more so any external property? If any sentient being needs anything for any reason, whatever it might be, if it exists, I'll give it to that being. I'll give my hand to whoever needs a hand. I will give my foot to whoever needs a foot. I'll give my eye to whoever needs an eye. I'll give my flesh to whoever needs my flesh. I'll give my blood to whoever needs my blood. I'll give my major and minor body parts to whoever needs major and minor body parts. I'll give my head to whoever needs a head. What need is there even to speak of external property, such as money, grain, gold, silver, gems, jewelry, horses, elephants, chariots, vehicles, etc. So likewise, the Akshayamati Sutra says, I should throw this body into the needs of all sentient beings, whatever they may be, regarding the body as dedicated to this goal. A bodhisattva looks at physical pain and is not distressed, but takes care of sentient beings. So now we have a few qualifications. For those who are studying Chandrakirti's Madhyamika Vatara, and especially if we're looking at the qualities of the first ground, it's important to notice that a first ground bodhisattva is able to give away their body in this way without experiencing either physical or mental suffering. And there are two reasons given for this. Firstly, they have achieved single-pointed, non-conceptual insight based on the emptiness of self and phenomena, and therefore do not identify their merely imputed self as being one of the aggregates, body being one of the aggregates. And secondly, through great compassion, their pain is transformed into the joy of taking the suffering of others upon themselves. So these are captured in the following two stanzas of Chandrakirti's text. If simply hearing or thinking of the phrase, give me, brings such joy to the child of the conqueror, joy not experienced even by arhats who enter into peace, what need is there to speak of the joy when giving away everything? Cutting his body and giving it away, he sees from his own pain, the pain of others, such as their birth in the hells. And as if he were undergoing these situations himself, thus swiftly he strives to cut away all their pain. So there is a note of caution here. And Shantideva strikes at himself in chapter 5. This is another example of how we really need to look at the entire text at one time in order to often interpret individual verses or sets of verses. In chapter 5, Shantideva advises us to only consider giving away our body in actuality in dependence on having generated sufficient great compassion and wisdom. So he says, at the beginning, the guide of the world encourages the giving of such things as food. Later, when accustomed to this, one may progressively start to give away even one's flesh. At such a time when my mind is developed to the point of regarding my body like food, then what hardship would there be when it came to giving away my flesh? Having forsaken all evil, there would be no suffering, and due to wisdom, there would be no lack of joy. Now my mind is afflicted by mistaken conceptions, and my body is caused harm by unwholesome deeds. End of quote. So in other words, our ability to increasingly give is to be understood as something which must carefully and incrementally be developed. And that is why in chapter 2, the one we're currently looking at, we are being meticulously presented with how we're to lay down the firm foundations for this commencement of this evolutionary journey. What is being asked of us now is to start considering, at least considering, what it means to give something as precious, yet also as problematic, because it's afflicted, an afflicted aggregate, as our body, away. Nothing short of a radical attitudinal overhaul is required. As Geshe Doga indicates, normally we use our body as a slave to our senses and to sustain ourselves. Here, one decides to use one's body to fulfill the wishes of the conquerors and their children. Kabje Zopa Rinpoche says, to generate bodhicitta, to generate compassion for numberless sentient beings, this comes from renunciation, realizing that this body is in the nature of suffering. By recognizing this, we don't get attached. We are liberated from the suffering body. Kabje Zopa Rinpoche continues, we bear unbelievable hardships for this body that we cherish more than anything. We keep it clean, spend lots of money on clothes and food for it, spend time exercising, doing hard work for money, and so much worry and fears taking care of the body. This is the same for billionaires and poor people. There is so much discontentment and dissatisfaction. We try to get everything we can from the world. We try to find happiness, but we experience continual physical and mental problems, relationship and business problems. In spite of all of these hardships we bear for the body, one day we will die. And Rinpoche says, rather than using this body to obtain things that have no meaning, we can use it and bear the hardships to practice Dharma for the happiness of future lives. So you can see here how critical this thought is, how it expands to embrace the whole Bodhisattva aspiration. So Gyaltsabje says, quote, regarding this statement, since I have a body that can be offered thus, I offer it. To the conquerors and their children, I offer completely and always this body of mine, giving up the mind that makes it completely mine. Please, supreme, brave beings, enjoy it. So this attitude was perfectly manifested by the Buddha in an earlier life, and I've already referred to the story of the prince with the tigress and her cubs, but I'm just going to complete that section. His heart brimming with supreme compassion and resolve, he asked his brothers to leave him. You too can go off. I'm returning to the forest for a personal thing. Then Prince Mahasattva left that part of the forest and returned to where the tigress was. He hung his clothes on a forest creeper and sat and prayed. To benefit transmigratory beings, may I offer the peace of peerless enlightenment. My mind compassionate and steadfast, I give this body which others find hard to give up. May I achieve the flawless, priceless enlightenment that Bodhisattvas so keenly seek. I shall free beings in the triple worlds from the intense fear of the ocean of existence. Then the prince lay in front of the tigress, but the tigress did nothing to the compassionate Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva thought, alas, she is too weak and incapable. He rose up in search of a sharp weapon and did not find one. Taking hold of a strong branch of bamboo stick, 100 years old, he cut his throat and fell down onto the grass before the tigress. When the Bodhisattva fell, the earth shook in 6 ways, like a boat pounded by winds amidst the sea. The sun, as if caught by Rahu, did not shine with its rays. Flowers mingled with divine perfumes and powders fell. Then a certain goddess, her mind overwhelmed with astonishment, praised the Bodhisattva. She said, O noble-minded one, holding all beings in your compassion, here as you joyfully give your body, hero among men, before long and without trouble, you will find the pristine state of peace, that tranquil supreme state devoid of birth and death's pain. Then, licking the blood-stained body of the Bodhisattva, the tigress reduced his body to bones without flesh and blood. So what is the point of making such an offering? So by returning to the intent of verse 8, what we can say is that we are capable right now of making a promise in the form of a dedication to give away all of our bodies to the conquerors and their children, so that, as Drugpa Geltsen says in his commentary to this verse, through being completely under your care, by depending on a refuge that is free from all fear, I shall have no fear of existence. And due to being freer from fear, I shall benefit sentient beings. I shall perfectly transcend the meaningless previous negativities that I've accumulated, and henceforth shall commit no more, even at the cost of my life. End of quote. So that's on page 24. So clearly we are to read the 9th verse as a continuation of the meaning of the last. And this is indicated by Gyaltsabje's outline, which places both verses under the heading offering one's body. So number 9 says, through being completely under your care, I shall benefit all with no fears of conditioned existence. I shall perfectly transcend my previous evils, and in the future shall commit no more. So this is a description of the unimaginable benefits that flow, not just from offering one's body as the Bodhisattva Prince Mahasattva did, but from our own offering of our body according to our capacity, given our current level of practice. Even to decide to investigate the meaning of doing this is remarkable. That its source, as a wish, is loving kindness and compassion for all others is also remarkable to reflect upon. Have we really appreciated the interdependent relationship linking our body directly to the care of others, care by others? Is there any way we can appreciate the survival of our body for even a day without considering its interrelationship with the bodies of others? Those who work to grow our food, nurse us in hospital, build the roofs over our heads, and so forth. So the last portion of this verse, 9, is dealing with the need to purify negativities created by me in the past, as well as promise or pledge not to commit them again in the future. So it says, I shall perfectly transcend my previous evils, and in the future shall commit no more. And the reason we are compelled to engage in such purification and make such pledges is not just so that we can avoid creating further negativities that result in future samsaric suffering, but so that our pathway as a trainee Bodhisattva might be unhindered by obstacles that, if sufficiently strong, will delay us or even throw us off our path. Then we'll be of no assistance to ourselves, let alone assistance to others. And unlike the prince who slipped away from his brothers to secretly return to the forest because he knew that if they suspected his intention to give his body, they would try and stop him, there is no prospect that we would ever decide to return to complete the deed. In other words, if we don't mitigate the power of our previous evils, not only would we meet with continuous samsaric misfortune, but the suffering of mother sentient beings would be in no way mitigated, because we would have withdrawn our Bodhisattva promise and thus have abandoned them. So in other words, if we don't offer in these extraordinary ways, we are effectively abandoning our Bodhisattva promise, because we're not going to be able to travel the path because we're clinging in a way that's going to thwart the unfurling of those enlightened qualities. So we're now going to jump, we're going to verse 10, but we're going to be giving a commentary which is going to cover verses 10 to verses 22. And this is a reference to offerings that are emanated. So we need to define what's meant by emanated offerings. So to do this, we can recall that earlier verses dealt with offerings that were not owned. This covered verses 2 to 5. And you'll recall that Geshe Doga noted that such offerings are the best for those of us who feel that we don't have much to offer. Then the objects to whom these unowned offerings were to be made was identified in verses 6 to 7. Verses 8 and 9 then dealt with offering one's body. So you can appreciate here how skillfully Shantideva is presenting this topic. It's absolutely extraordinarily intricate and meaningful. Nevertheless, even though we might not be able to offer our actual body, we can still promise to donate our bodies to those in need in future lives when our capacity to do so will be mature. So that's taking into consideration the cautionary caveat that Shantideva himself made. So it's now possible, and it's only now possible, to see that emanated offerings are not dealing with specifically offering one's body or offering what is unowned. Rather, it's referring to what we refer to as common offerings and also to peerless offerings. So common offerings, as Geshe Doga describes, there are 12 common or surpassed offerings. These all relate. So these are surpassed offerings, meaning they can be surpassed. These all relate to normal worldly activities of our everyday life, which we transform into offerings. So the 12 common offerings are bath, clothes, ornaments, scents, flowers, incense, food, light, crystal palaces, blessing parasols, instruments, musical instruments, the blessing that may be continually in the aspect of offerings. So each of these has further internal divisions. So for comprehensive elaboration, and due to our time restraints, I ask you to refer to Geshe Doga's presentation in Block 4, the 9th of July, 2013. Everything is made very clear there. and the content is easy to understand. Peerless offerings, the second kind, these are to be distinguished from common offerings, which are considered common, in that they can be surpassed by something higher, something greater. So in contrast, as Geshe-Doga indicates, the word Lama Mepa, by contrast, refers to what is unsurpassed, in the sense that it is peerless, the very highest. No other offering, in short, can exceed it. So we're now, I'm going to move very quickly, returning to common offerings. This has, just to give an example, the first common offering is the bath, and has three subdivisions: the bathing house, the way of bathing, and the drying of the body. So I'm not going to go into detail. The bathing house refers to verse 10, to very sweetly scented bathing chambers with brilliantly sparkling crystal floors and exquisite pillars ablaze with gems, having canopies above aglow with pearls. The way of bathing pertains to verse 11. I beseech the Tathagatas and their sons to come and bathe their bodies from many jeweled vases filled with waters scented and enticing, to the accompaniment of music and song. So just by way of illustration, we can find commentary for many of these individual verses in Geshe-Doga's commentary. So for example, under this verse, we have a following detail. This is just a sample to show you how much finesse we can go into if we want to critically explore. Gyaltsabje's explanation is, one offers a bath to the Tathagatas and their children out of many vases made of gold and other precious metals. Here, the Dakinis use the vases to scoop up the scented water from the basin and pour that out as a way of showering. That bowl is filled with pleasant incense water that is fragrantly scented and has beautiful flowers in it, accompanied by music and dance. The water has flower petals in it, which gives the water extra fragrance and scent. There are also dakinis who are playing music and offering dances. So it's just an example of how incredibly coloured or upward elaborated are these scenes of offering, if we really want to go into that kind of detail. And of course, it helps to go into that kind of detail because it means we enter into the space of the offering in a very real way, vivid way. So the drying of the body following the bath pertains to verse 12. Let me dry their bodies with incomparable cloths, clean and well anointed with scent, and then may I present these holy beings with fragrant garments of suitable colours. Then the offering of clothes. This was already anticipated in the description just given of the incomparable, clean, fragrant clothes with which we dry the bodies of the holy beings, together with the reference of fragrant garments of suitable colours. Then the offering of ornaments, reversing verse 13. I adorn with manifold ornaments and various raiments, fine and smooth, the Aryas, Samantabhadra, Manjughosha, Avalokiteshvara, and all the others. Scents, referring to 14. Just like polishing pure, refined gold, do I anoint the Buddha's forms that blaze with light, with the choicest perfumes whose fragrance permeates 1,000 million worlds. In his commentary, Gyaltsabje explains this verse thus: the supreme smell that gives rise to the fragrant smells of the 3,000 worlds I apply to the body of the able ones. And Geshe-Doga adds, here, fragrances of the 3,000 worlds implies that the fragrance of the balms pervades the whole universe. The bodies of all the able ones, referred to as the Buddha's forms in Batchelor's translation, refers to Shakyamuni Buddha and all the enlightened beings. Then the quality of the bodies of enlightened beings are presented that are glowing and blazing like polished, refined gold. At this point, one brings one's mind to the incredible qualities of the Buddha's body, which are enumerated in the list of 32 major and 80 minor marks of the Buddha. As mentioned here, the Buddha's enlightened body is glowing and blazing like polished refined gold. It has a natural radiance that fills the entire universe. 15. And the highest objects of offering I offer, of giving I offer, beautiful, well-arranged garlands, as well as enchanting, sweet-smelling flowers such as lily, jasmine, and lotus blossoms. Incense, 16. Also I send forth clouds of incense, whose sweet aroma stills away the mind. Food, we find in the second two lines of verse 16, as well as celestial delicacies, including a variety of food and drinks. So Geshe-Doga annotates these lines. He says, one important thing to visualize is that one makes an offering of food, or when one makes an offering of food or flowers to the deities, is to do it respectfully with both hands. This is worth remembering when we make an offering to our teachers, of course. So that would be good to visualize. One needs to be mindful, says Geshe-Doga, about presenting the food's offering in beautiful, clean containers. The food offering presented to the taste sense includes drinks as well, and it should have a variety of colours and taste and an enticing aroma. With some practices, we offer things that represent the traditional offering called a torma, which is a food offering to the deities or to an enlightened being. Those who are familiar with tantric practice will recall that we visualize the deities accepting the torma by visualizing a hollow tube of light descending from the enlightened beam's mouth to the torma. The outside of the torma has the appearance of a hard substance, and inside is a nectar-like liquid. It is this nectar which is accepted by the sentient being, the enlightened being, when they suck up its essence through the tube of light that serves as a pipe. So you can see here the incredible care and finesse that we can bring to bear with each of these offerings. So light, verse 17, I offer them jeweled lamps arranged on golden lotus buds. Upon land sprinkled with scented water, do I scatter delicate flower petals. Crystal palaces, 18, to those who have the nature of compassion, I offer palaces resounding with melodious hymns, exquisitely illuminated by hanging pearls and gems that adorn the infinities of space, the blessing of parasols, verse 19. Eternally shall I offer to all the Buddhas jeweled umbrellas with golden handles and exquisite ornaments embellishing the rims, standing erect, their shapes beautiful to behold, and instruments, 20. And in addition, may a mass of offerings resounding with sweet and pleasing music, like clouds that appease the misery of all, each remain for as long as necessary. And the final common offering, which was the blessing that may be continually in the aspect of offerings, 21, and may a continuous rain of flowers and precious gems descend upon the reliquaries and the statues and upon all the jewels of Dharma. Geshe-Doga indicates that this verse is basically an aspirational prayer to ensure that all the offerings that we have presented continually abide. They don't cease to be offering. They continue as offerings for as long as we can imagine. And in this way, continue to please the minds of the enlightened ones. Geshe-Jumpa Tekchok likewise says, here we bless the offerings to be made continuously, even when we're not thinking about making them. It's rather wonderful, isn't it? It's a bit like having a vow. You know, the vow of not killing, as we know, is active when we're sleeping. In the same way, if we make this sort of prayer of continuous extending offerings, it will continue even when we're not thinking of making an offering at that moment. So this means, as Geshe Jumper Tekchok emphasizes, we create the causes for the flow of offerings to continue, even when we're focused on something else. Perhaps we're asleep. So referring to the verse itself in a little bit more detail, the reliquaries mentioned represent the enlightened mind. The statues represent enlightened bodies. And the jewels of Dharma referred to represent enlightened Dharma, meaning true cessation and true paths. So I just want to tell a little personal story here. One year I was in Bodh Gaya to receive teachings with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, as were many, many other, several 100,000 people. And after His Holiness gives the discourse, there's often an opportunity to go to the Great Enlightenment Stupa to do Kora, which of course is an absolutely wonderful thing to do. And on this occasion, I had a little tiny bag of rice with me. So I was intending to make offerings at the stupa. And when I entered into the grounds of the stupa, I suddenly realized that Kabje Zopa Rinpoche was doing Kora, and he had a stream of students behind him. And of course, I very quickly merged, and so that I could do Kora with my teacher and my precious fellow students. And after some period of time, I suddenly thought, oh, I'll offer my bag of rice to Lama Zopa to offer. Because I'm thinking like Shantideva here, if Lama Zopa offers it and I make the offering to myself, or may I be offering like Lama Zopa's offering with the rice that I'd given, that seemed like a pretty skillful thing to do. So I attempted to pass my rice to Lama Zopa, who was well protected by a cordon of inner students who were sort of making sure that no one got too close, so that Rinpoche had free passage. And after some time, the bag of rice was returned to me, had been unaccepted, or hadn't got to its destination. And then suddenly, Kabje Zopa Rinpoche stopped, turned around and said, "Does someone have a bag of rice?" I said, "Oh, yes, Rinpoche." And so the bag of rice was handed to Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who then gave the most extraordinarily beautiful teaching on the power of offering, and particularly making offerings to the Great Enlightenment Stupa, seen as inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of our precious teacher. So that was just one of those marvelous things that happen to you when you go on pilgrimage. So I've never forgotten that. So I went back the next day with another bag of rice, thinking, I want to make more offerings, and I threw the rice up into the sky as far as I possibly. So I flung it with the thought, may it ascend to the highest realms and then fall as a rain of Dharma in future times, and then dedicated that as I did a Kora. And so I'm not saying I'm a great practitioner or anything, I'm just trying to share the kind of dynamic sense in which this offering practice takes us to the very heart of our training in the spiritual path of a Bodhisattva. So to make an offering in that powerful place to a reliquary stupa has unbelievable benefit. And so we really should throw ourselves wholeheartedly into these opportunities when they arrive. So the next section is unequaled or unsurpassed offerings, which is described in verse 22 of Shantideva. In the same way as Manjughosha and others have made offerings to the conquerors, similarly do I bestow gifts upon the Tathagatas, the protectors, their sons and all. So as Geshe Jumper Tekchok says, the first offerings were not the best offerings that can be made. That's why they're called surpassed. They are good offerings to make, but there are better ones. The unsurpassed offerings are not like that, because there is no offering that is better. There is no way of offering better than their vast way of offering in contemplation. And he continues. I'll leave that. So the reference to and others here in the verse, it says, in the same way as Manjugosha and others in the first line, refers to Samantabhadra, as is made clear by Gotsabje's commentary. He says, just like the empowered bodhisattvas, Manjushri, Samantabhadra, and so forth, made offerings to the conquerors by emanating them into the whole of space, end of quote. So again, this is asking us to make boundless space-like offerings using the same visualization technique which was described earlier under the name of Samantabhadra offerings. So if you want further detail, I recommend referring to Geshe Doga's commentary in block 4, July the 16th, pages 3 to 4. There he describes visualizing oneself as Samantabhadra, holding at one's heart a jewel held between one's palms. Innumerable rays of light radiate out from this jewel, each carrying a precious offering on its tip, from which further light rays emanate, each carrying a precious replica of the precious offering on their tips. So in other words, different light rays emitted from the jewel in our hands can carry different offerings, which then exponentially replicate. Geshe Doga indicates that such a visualization is the easiest one for us ordinary beings to do as a way of making unsurpassable offerings. And I thought just to mention, this doesn't mean that we can only increase one kind of offering at a time, because each offering can give rise to its own replicas ad infinitum simultaneously with each of the other offerings. So they're not sort of somehow ruling each other out, because infinity is infinity. There is no restriction. So in this way, we can fill the entire universe with one offering, eternally replicated, if that's what we're doing, or we can fill it with a variety of offerings, infinitely duplicated. Samantabhadra and Manjushri are two of the 8 great bodhisattvas, Avalokiteshvara, Manjushri, Maitreya, Vajrapani, Mahatamaprapta, Samantabhadra, Kshittigarbha, and Savarana Vishkambini, who are known as the 8 close sons of the Buddha because they were intimate parts of his inner retinue, and each exemplifies a particular power. Of the 2 specifically mentioned in Shantideva's verse, though the others are included in Shantideva's and so forth, Manjushri embodies wisdom and Samantabhadra embodies expertise in making offerings and prayers of aspiration. Geshe Jumper Tekchok indicates that the lines, in the same way as Manjugosha and others have made offerings to the conquerors, means that we're to think of making offerings just as these holy great beings have made them. He says, to make dedication prayers extremely vast, we say, I pray just like Manjushri and Samantabhadra pray. May all that they pray for come about. Similarly, here we think, I offer whatever inconceivable offerings Manjushri and so forth and so on think of and offer to the Buddhas and their children. And in that way, our offerings become extremely extensive. Continues. The way the Bodhisattvas make offerings and thereby accumulate merits is inconceivable, beyond the grasp of our minds. Even when we do not have anything to actually give, they accumulate vast merit through mentally emanating offerings in contemplation, just as we say when blessing offerings mentally emanated clouds of peerless offerings of Samantabhadra, may they pervade the whole extensive space. Each time they make offerings this way, they accumulate an enormous stock of merit in every moment. We should think, I also will offer like that. So this is indeed a very clever, yet a very meaningful strategy, as even if we're currently unable or currently incapable of feeling that we can offer extensively, we can nonetheless muster an aspirational prayer to make offerings just as they have so excellently done. In this way, we ride, as it were, on the magical back of their miraculous power. It wouldn't be appropriate to say that we ride on their shirt tails, but the meaning is the same. So there are several other meanings of peerless offerings. I'll quickly touch upon them. And Geshe Doga presents these in the 16th of April, page 4, block 4. Another interpretation of what unsurpassable offering means is that the unsurpassable offering is to engage in the practice of Dharma and to uphold the doctrine. More specifically, it refers to listening to the Dharma and putting it into practice. This form of unsurpassable offering is, of course, a very significant one. Another way of explaining unsurpassable offering is to visualize one's own virtues from the 3 times transforming into offerings and then presenting those offerings. Then there is the most supreme of offerings, which is the actual generation of bodhicitta. So I think you'll agree that these are very precious to keep in mind. So by way of conclusion, Geshe Tekchok says, the Kadampa Geshe Lamas say that if we think the right way, the collections we can gather through making offerings can be quite easily done without limit. What they are talking about is mentally emanated offerings. So we're now up to verse 23. I glorify the oceans of excellence with limitless verses of harmonious praise. May these clouds of gentle eulogy constantly ascend to their presence. So this verse follows the logic of the previous verses, except that the emphasis is now on offering limitless verses of harmonious praises that form clouds constantly rising up to adorn the ocean of excellence. And this is something to bear in mind when we're chanting or offering prayers, as Lou has done for us so beautifully at the beginning of the session. That's some special visualization techniques that we can add, in other words. So there's a visualization that while we're chanting or offering beautiful, melodious words, we visualize having many heads, and that each of those many heads has many tongues, and each of those tongues is chanting. So you can see here it's the same kind of exponential logic of Samantabhadra offerings, but now being applied to our own act of offering prayer, harmonious praise. So while performing that visualization, while chanting, we're also thinking in the same limitless way, may these praises always arise without cessation even when I'm not thinking about praising, and may I thereby continuously gather merit. Geltsabje says, further, even if one does not actually sing the melodious hymns oneself to the great numbers of superiors, may infinite clouds definitely reach them in every place and at all times. So in short, this verse instructs us how to perform verbal prostration. How wonderful it is to offer up our voice entirely for the service of others. To do this has a marvelous purifying effect. And it means that in the future, our voice will be karmically empowered to carry great meaning and benefit for others. To view the situation from the other side, if we use our voice to injure and alienate others, shouting harshly, screaming, abusing, etc., in the future, our voice will be an object of fear in others, and it will be bereft of any benefit for those who hear us. On one of the retreats at a teacher centre, one of the nuns was leading the prayers in the most incredibly beautiful, moving manner. And on one occasion, Lama Zopa Rinpoche stopped the chanting and paid respect to the Venerable Nun, saying that the power of her prayers was due to her offering of her voice in former lifetimes. I just thought it was remarkable because we're all incredibly moved. It was a privilege being there. But Lama Zopa was sort of reaching back and displaying the way in which that quality of her voice was the product of previous lives' practice. So it's very apropos of the topic, isn't it? So considering all this, we can see there's immense benefit in chanting mellifluously so that even the insects who hear us will be charmed. So verse 24 deals with physical prostration, and we might leave that for next week. It's not a long section, and then we're going to be moving on again quite quickly. So I've discovered I'm going at about 4 to 5 times the speed of Geshe Doga, who's giving a line by line, verse by verse commentary. So I hope you're finding that the pace is all right. I know I'm throwing quite a lot out there, but I'm really, again, trying to get some feeling stirred up, trying to inspire us and to show how incredibly real this text is as a practice manual. So I'll open it up to any comments or questions or reflections or stories, anything you like.
If your mission is to inspire, you're doing a very good job.
Thanks. I was thinking, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh.
Who's speaking?
No,
sorry?
you go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
ahead.
No.
Who is
No. I have
Me?
lost them. Yeah.
Go ahead,
Me?
Kodo.
Photo.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact day, but soon after our last class, I had a dream. It
Mhm.
was so amazing. I was in this long a rectangular room. And on the right was the Dalai Lama in my dream. And I was like, I was kind of awake and kind of sleepy, you know, that special stage of sleepiness. And there he was sitting on this big chair, and he was to my right. And I was sitting on some kind of like bigger open bench type of thing. And he got up at some point and he came over and he sat next to me. And I'm just sitting there going, I'm in the room with the Dalai Lama. And there he is sitting next to me. And he put his forehead right here. And then he put his nose on my right cheek. And I was just sitting there going, like my jaw opened and I was like, oh, wow. And when I woke up, my whole body, because I don't have a guru, so he's my guru guy. And when I woke up, it felt so real. It was so amazing. But do these parts have, and I didn't realize any kind of mind transfer or anything like that. I was just like in complete awe. I was having a dream that I was in a room with him and he sat next to me and put his forehead here and his nose on my cheek.
I think not all dreams are significant, but you have to recognize a significant dream as a significant dream when it does occur. So this is clearly one of those. So it's a remarkable blessing. I would have to say it was a direct blessing from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who took advantage of your dream state to come in, if you like, and say hi. So that the touching of your face is a very, very precious form of blessing because it represents a karmic closeness with the student. So in the monasteries, when one's teacher, we see one's teacher again after a long space of time, if we're being physically apart, and that teacher leans over and touches our head with their head. It's said to be a very great blessing because it's like the vast vase of Dharma being poured from the guru's mind into your mind. So it seems to be like a direct transmission. So there's an element of sort of playfulness in His Holiness's nose on your cheek, but that's very characteristic of His Holiness's sense of humor as well. And so I'll just treasure that as a direct relationship. And when you say you don't have a teacher or guru, I think you might possibly have one. I think that's what the dream is about. So how wonderful is that, hey? Yes. Thank you.
You know, Kodo, there's a picture in the latest issue of the Wisdom Publications catalog, picture of His Holiness doing exactly that with another woman. And he's holding her right hand as well. I'll send you a photo of that if you'd like to see it.
So in Buddhism, we refer to dreams like that as boons, that they're blessings. And it's said to we pay tribute to them, we feel joy, and then we don't cling. Because if we try to cling and go to bed every night thinking, I'm waiting for next installment or the next phase, we kind of cripple or block the spontaneous openness that allowed that to happen in the first place. And so we enjoy the experience, we learn and we grow from it, but we don't cling to it. Yeah. How wonderful is that? Yeah. I just want to frame a little bit with my presentation. I'm deliberately pulling in resources from different places. I'm not assuming or expecting you to be doing the same. I'm trying to show the kind of ways in which they all resonate with each other to create this cohesive presentation that's incredibly profound and meaningful. But when it comes to, for those who are doing the subject as an examinable subject, I'm going to zero in on material that is found in 3 or 4 of our commentaries that are in our resources kit on the Google Drive. So except the only exception for that's going to be the Lum Rim, which in the sense that I'm expecting that you will refer to the Lum Rim when necessary. So in a little bit of time in Shantideva's text, we're going to be dealing again with refuge, and in some detail as a preliminary practice prior to taking engaging Bodhisattva vows in the 3rd chapter. And so when we get to that section, it's very, very valuable to be looking at the Lum Rim presentation of refuge. And also in that, this chapter, the last part is dealing with purification of evil deeds. And so the teachings on karma, the characteristics of karma, how it operates, how it ripens, how it's purified and so forth, is again extensively dealt with in the Lum Rim. So we can supplement our Shantideva textual understanding very directly by referring there. So I think we'll stop there. So thank you very much. And obviously we'll finish with the final prayers. So I'll ask Lou to lead. Thank you.
From Shantideva. For as long as space endures, and for as long as living beings remain, until then may I too abide to dispel the misery of the world. May all the pains of living creatures ripen solely upon myself, and through the might of the Bodhisattva Sangha, may all beings experience happiness. May the teachings which are the sole medicine for suffering and the origin of every joy be materially supported and honored and abide for a very long time. I prostrate to Manjughosha, through whose kindness wholesome minds ensue, and I prostrate to my spiritual masters, through whose kindness I develop. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not yet arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen never diminish, but increase more and more. May my Venerable Lama's life be firm, his white divine action spread in the 10 directions, dispelling the darkness of all beings in the 3 realms. Long life prayers, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world. To the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until cyclic existence is ended. To Lama Zopa Rinpoche, you who uphold the subduous moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunat's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplished magnificent prayers honoring the 3 jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Tenzin Osalhita, Venerable One, to you whose kindness exceeds that of all the conquerors, for those wanderers in far-off places, especially the West, mindful of your loving concern for us and intentionally descending again into a family of a far distant land, we make this request. O Lama, please, please live long. Geshe Lobsang Doga, you with an immutable vow to spread to the limits of space the Dharma of the Able One in general, and the Dharma of the pure-minded conqueror, supreme, superior spiritual friend of unrepayable kindness, please remain for hundreds of eons and bestow the supreme and common cities. Geshe Tupten Sherab, beloved teacher leading your students toward wisdom and compassion, explaining through exacting discernment the steps of the graduated path. You are the unequaled guide. Please live a long and stable life. Multiplying mantras. Chom Dan De Jin Sheg Padra Chom Pa Yang. Dag Pa Zog Pe Sangye Nampa Nang. Ze U Ki Gel Pola Chag Shalo. Jangchub Sempa Sempa Chenpo Kyun. Tuzang Pola Chag Shalo. Tayata Penchagriya Avabadani Soha. Om Duru Duru Jaya Muke Soha. Shall I do that
Thank-
more? Okay.
That's all right. But thank you very much, Lou.
You're
It's
welcome.
wonderful. So I'll say goodbye and take care, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.